All right, ready?
I am as ready as I'm going to be.
Okay, I love it. Welcome back to Between Meetings and Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Alexis Starks. I'm the editor in chief of Mothered Magazine. And today I have with me the fabulous woman being featured in our June issue of Mothered Magazine. She's a doctor, she's a leadership consultant, she is a business owner, she's a mom. Welcome, Alex Pensiero. So excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, you have a very impressive bio. You started your career in the classroom and did psychology, went back to school to get a doctorate and multiple master's degrees, and you have kids, and now you are running a leadership consulting firm. So, like, what can't you do? Like, it's like the list goes on of just impressive, 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 impressive. And take me through how you kind of got to this point. What does it actually feel like today doing all of this?
Absolutely. And yesterday was actually my 40th birthday, so I feel like I'm
Happy
like
birthday.
I've hit a milestone here, and I'm like reflecting on the last decade or so. So thank
Yes.
you, thank you. Um, you know, it's it's been authentic, and
Hmm.
I don't know that I've ever had a long-term target in mind, but I've just been really toggled to the journey, and I feel like
Hmm.
doors have opened, passions have changed, my identity has changed, especially as I stepped into motherhood, and I've just allowed my passions to kind of guide me into the next phase because when I was in third grade and knew at that very moment that I wanted to be a teacher, I never saw myself doing anything but that. But
Oh, wow.
that's actually not the journey that I've been on. And so I'm just kind of let go, let God kind of thing and just
Yeah.
let it happen naturally. And so it's been a tug of war. But it's also been a beautiful, authentic, des- uh, journey, not necessarily
Hmm.
destination. So I'm along for the
But
ride and come.
it sounds like, teaching is still kind of at the heart of what you're doing. It may not be a
Hmm.
professor or a school teacher, but you are teaching, your consulting and coaching is teaching. And
Hmm.
um, do you kind of feel that a little bit, that teacher aspect, or does it take a different form for you?
Hmm. I think at the crux of it, if I peeled the labels away, it's learning.
Mm.
Learning about myself, learning about an approach, about the system, about how people approach learning. I think
Mm.
we are in a day and age where everyone has access to things, and the access isn't necessarily the challenge or the gap, but it's how to process all of it in a world where we're saturated uh, with
Hmm.
information. So what it really boils down to for me is the person that's doing the learning. I started my career working with students with significant behavioral challenges and needs, and they taught me more about myself and really kind of opened my eyes to, that learning looks different for everybody. And that's kind of what I've taken with me on my journey through coaching, through consultation, is really individualizing the supports that are needed for each
Hmm.
person, but everybody's capable. And that's what
Yeah,
I've loved about this most and has been most exciting for me. But to your point, yeah, it's been about teaching. It's been about learning at the crux of everything.
I love that. And I feel like, you know, going from schooling and teaching at schools to entrepreneurship is a big jump. Like, I
Mm.
never imagined myself being an entrepreneur until I was kind of thrown into it. And then I feel like motherhood prepared me for it because I was like, oh, I have to fail and adapt all the time, anyways. So,
Yeah.
was that ever on your like bucket list or dream list to run your own business?
No, no, not no. But when I went for my most recent degree, which was in leadership coaching for organizational performance, I found myself so aligned,
Hmm.
and that that process, that career field, it spoke to me so deeply.
Yeah.
And I've now gravitated towards filling that bucket more frequently than not. And so that has led me to, well, if I want to do this work full time and if I want to pour back into people in a way that also fills me simultaneously,
Hmm.
then that was the next step in doing it. So the business is kind of a side to the actual service itself, and that's just the
Yeah.
avenue that I've taken to be able to do that work.
I love that. And you talked about this a little bit in your written interview about filling your own cup and how
Mm-hmm.
that kind of felt like that realization of the getting your pink back and restoring yourself is actually a gift to your children. And I wholeheartedly believe that. And that's why I love doing what I do too, is because when I can do something I'm passionate about, I can show up better for my children, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so we don't talk about that enough as a society in general. But um, was there like a moment where you realized that you were allowed to want these things again outside of motherhood, that you wanted to pour yourself into those things and gave yourself permission to do so?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if there was ever a moment I wasn't doing that, but what I was
Oh.
confronted with was the guilt
Hmm.
of, or the questions of, should I be doing this? Is this taking away from them? And being in a constant state of self-reflection of what do they need? What do I need? How can I balance both? And sometimes it isn't balanced. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'm at their gymnastics competition when I had part of my dissertation due to my advisor, and that was a sacrifice I made, or vice versa. I dropped them off at gymnastics or at school, and I should be showing up for some kind of event, and I have to have a meeting or I have a client. And so it is, like I said earlier, like this tug of war of like being cognizant, but being able to manage both and still allowing for those like uncomfortable feelings of guilt. But what I find most powerful about feeling guilty is it means I need to pause and reflect on why,
Hmm.
and then realign in a way that is in concert with my value system of, and also what they need for me as a mother. So,
Right.
them, but then also seeing me set goals and prioritizing myself as like, I don't ever want them to get lost in the sauce and like lose themselves in whatever identity and journey they take in their life. So, not pouring, giving so much to everybody else that you have nothing left for yourself and you're depleted. So, regardless of it being motherhood and career or whatever else the tug of war is, that I think it's
Hmm.
okay. Both can coexist.
And I think that's a really important thing to touch on is that guilt, because I talk about guilt a lot, is kind of this internalization of society's unrealistic expectations as like your failings, right? Like it's unrealistic that we should be 100% at work and at home, right? And so when we are pouring into work and that we have to sacrifice a little bit at home, we start to feel like I'm not a good enough mom, or I should be showing up more at home, or or vice versa. And as someone who's equally ambitious about work, there's plenty of days where I'm like on my phone because I'm in the middle of a launch or something big or a report, and my phone's going off, but we picked up the kids from daycare, and I'm like, oh, I should just wait until the kids go down. But I'm like, I'm right in the middle of it. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna take five minutes. And that's hard of like a mindset switch because you have to like override this conditioning almost that you should be 100% at everything.
Mhm.
That's hard.
Well, right. Shouldn't that, I'm going to say that word too, but you just said it. It's that word should,
Mm.
right? And I'm so curious about, for all of us as women, as moms, as ambitious individuals, that word should is toxic
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. Is like, well, where does that come from? And who
Hmm.
creates that? And I think that's where the empowerment comes from, is like, you're the only one that identifies what you should be doing, and everything else is just
Hmm.
noise. But it's hard to see. Like, I'm not here to say that I'm perfect. Like, there's times I see little memes online where it's like, yeah, if you're not home with your child during the most pivotal developmental milestones of their
Yeah.
life, or they're at daycare, or, you're not feeding them. It's like, it's all noise, right? It's like at the end of the day,
Yeah.
if you love your kids and you show up for them in whatever capacity they need, you know your kids. And
Yeah.
so I always have a pulse on that of like what their needs are. And as long as they're safe and they know that I love them, like if you take 5 minutes to go finish your text or your email or whatever
Yeah.
else it is, like, does that mean you don't love them? No. But
Right, right.
it's the mental battlefield we we put ourselves in.
Yeah. And it's interesting, that because that should, my should is different from your should. And it's going to be different
Mhm.
from someone else on social media's should. And so it's very hard when you're just looking at social media and comparing yourself and they're like, well, they're doing that, so I should do this. And when in reality, it's very different circumstances. Does any of this ever come up in the leadership coaching that you do? This
Uh,
like, yeah, that's how does any of this kind of correlate to what you're doing?
Absolutely. So the interesting thing about coaching is you might be coaching a leader, but you're actually coaching all aspects of them,
Hmm.
where their personal life bleeds or their inner child bleeds into how they're processing their role or responsibility. And there's times in which we're coaching around this term, imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
that shows up frequently as well. Or we're coaching at, I can't focus at work because I have a laundry list of things to do that I'm falling behind in at home, or my, my laundry's stacking up, or
Yeah.
my kids are struggling in A, B, and C. And so that's the really cool thing about coaching is you're coaching the person. And I want to be clear that
Hmm.
I'm not advising. They are experts in their own life. And so I'm just
Uh-huh.
asking powerful questions that get them to reflect and remain curious
Hmm.
as to what their shoulds are and what makes them feel most aligned with their value system. And that also we set goals, and I to some degree hold them accountable. Ultimately they hold themselves accountable, but that the
Hmm.
process of getting them there is really rooted in the questions that I ask them so that they can be more exploratory and then see the growth from the inside out. So to kind of circle back to your question, it's like it certainly shows up in leadership coaching, but it is really cool that we're coaching a human being. And ultimately, if we're coaching them from the inside out, they're ultimately going to be more successful.
Yeah. I think, okay, I want to touch on this because something that we've talked about, and that you talked about in your interview is that you fail every day, right? And I fundamentally think this is so important to show our kids
Yeah.
how to fail and learn from it and move forward. I think early in motherhood and postpartum, I was failing at figuring out how to breastfeed and sleep
Right.
and, everything about that. And
The
then as
sleep.
an entrepreneur, yeah. And then as an entrepreneur, it's like, okay, well, that didn't work. Let me pivot and, adapt. And so I think, especially with high achieving women and especially with um, corporate CEOs, executives, there is a big fear of failure, right? Because generally, failure comes with being let go, being fired, or not seen as capable. So, but in motherhood and especially entrepreneurship, you kind of have to fail. You do fail and you have to pivot quickly and adapt. So, how do you marry these two together?
Hmm. I was very fortunate, and I will say this 100 times over, that when I started my career, and I said this earlier, that I started my career working with students in a placement that where they were demonstrating significant behavioral challenges. And when you're working in that space at 21 years old, which like I can barely get myself up and eat like some kind of breakfast before I even
Yeah.
get to work, right? Um, but at a very early stage of my career, when I was working with those students, that's all it was is failure.
Mhm.
I failed 20 times before I
Wow.
found the right tool or the right
Hmm.
strategy or the right approach or had a good conversation that helped me build rapport with people whom are not very easy to build rapport with because of trauma. And
Right.
so that's all to say that that's kind of where my relationship with failure was formed. And I think
Hmm.
if you look at failure from a lens of what is the opportunity and gift here? There's something on the other side that equals growth. And so I think if we're reframing what failure actually is, it's actually opportunity that you're getting
Hmm.
closer to a result that you're aiming to see. And sometimes it's not always clear. They say, clarity sometimes is hindsight's 2020.
Right,
And
right.
so, but I think if we're willing to approach failure in a different way, if we're willing to be curious about what the opportunity or gift is as a result of that failure, I think we develop healthier relationships. To your point about sleeping, I could have killed for some sleep with my
Yeah.
firstborn. She 45-minute increments for the first year while I was simultaneously
Yes.
in unpaid internship to be a school psychologist. Like it was messy, and I don't know if
Hmm.
I was actually like I was physically places. I don't know if I was mentally places, but even sleep training, like
Yeah.
it's a lot of failure, right?
Hmm.
Until it one day it just works or you just find the right approach. And so I think we should all be in a psychologically safe environment, and that comes from the organization that you're working in, that we don't recreate this culture of fearing to fail, right?
Hmm.
And that starts with modeling, whether it's in the
Yeah.
home or in the organization. And that's something I think we need to approach leaders with, of like, well, what is failure? What does it say about your identity? And really creating a healthier relationship that leaders have, that mothers have, with what failure actually means. And again, where the
Yeah.
opportunity for growth is on the other side.
Yeah. And I love modeling. I think that's something I did a post about this, but it's so important because not only does it show a good example of what you can do, but it makes it safer for other people to also do that. And that's a big thing is that safety, that psychological safety to do something that you maybe didn't think you could do. So I want to go back to like the personal side for a moment and tell me some of the things that you want to model for your daughters.
Ooh. Um, you know, for me, that growth isn't linear.
Mm.
You know, it's not, life is messy, and sometimes mommy makes mistakes. If I am feeling taxed or like overstimulated,
Hmm.
I struggle to regulate. And sometimes
Yeah.
my tone can be, not the way that I want it to come out, or my word choices. And, I'm okay owning to
Hmm.
them when I've made a mistake, and not, I'm sorry, mommy spoke to you like this, but, and then
Right.
giving them some kind of rationale. It's like, no, I messed up and I
Hmm.
own that. And I'm gonna work harder at that. And so we are constantly having those very raw, authentic, messy conversations in our house. And it's not perfect. I was breaking my kids up this morning. We lived a whole day before we got to this space. And
Yeah.
it's, I think that those are where the moments of learning
Hmm.
happen. And it's in
Yeah.
the modeling, but it's also in me helping them to process their own challenges and walking them through what that process can be or look like
Yeah.
in a healthy way. That it's okay to have feelings, but it's what you do with them that ultimately leads to a result that's healthy or not healthy.
Yeah. I think that's really important. And I'm in the toddler phase. So I'm in the teaching my toddlers, like, let's try out some deep breathing, right? We'll go breathe in, breathe out. Because my son is like epic meltdown,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
flailing, stomping on the floor. And my daughter is like, I just wanted to play with your toy, right? And he's like freaking out. And so, but there's moments where, especially at the end of the day or on the weekend, where I'm tired from parenting all day, that I'll snap and I have to, and I'll like turn, it's usually my son, where I turn him, I'm like, I'm sorry, I snapped. And I'll give him a
Yeah.
hug. And there's no excuse. It's just, I'm
Hmm.
sorry, I snapped. And we'll
Yeah.
just kind of, and he's like, okay, thank you. Like, and
Hmm.
it's an important skill to teach. Both are like boys and girls. Um, and I feel like that's an important skill to teach is that it's not perfection, it's progress, right?
Learning.
It's, and it's not just progress isn't linear. Like you said, it's daily, it's hourly, it's weekly, it's monthly, but as long as, maybe it's somewhat of an upward direction, like that's the
Yeah.
goal. It's sort of improvement.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more. And sometimes toddlers are irrational, so you're like, you're like, I'm trying to see your point, but I can.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I think it's just it's allowing space for vulnerability, both
Mm-hmm.
for a toddler, but that they're feeling safe in their emotions, and eventually they'll have the tools, especially if it's reinforced by your modeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is going to be interesting because so by the time this episode comes out, we'll have published this, but we're about to publish our maternal strengths report, which quantifies how motherhood impacts your leadership skills. And
Mhm.
shocker, shocker, it increased all your leadership
Yeah,
skills,
to no surprise.
resilience,
Yeah.
yeah, time management, prioritization, negotiation, crisis management, empathy, all these skills that we measured are increased by motherhood. And
Hmm.
so I'm curious to know what leadership skill or capability you think has increased the most for you after
Hmm.
becoming a mom.
Patience with
Ooh, that's a
myself,
good one.
with others. I think we're also in a space where like everything is automatized and everybody gets things
Yeah.
quickly, and so we are we have to hold on to the human aspect of growth, and for dear life.
Yeah.
I said patience, and I think flexibility,
Mm.
that you might task somebody with something, or that there's a person whom you're working parallel to that is taking an approach that maybe doesn't align with your vision, and how can you allow them space to try without imposing your thoughts and opinions. I think that being flexible in the process. I, as a teacher, was very type A in a lot of ways, but motherhood quickly makes you realize that you
It
have
does.
you have no control. You actually just make them think you do.
Yes, yes.
And but I think that translates, right?
Hmm.
Patience, flexibility, and I think empathy. I
Yeah.
think that's a big one. First, being empathetic with myself, and like that fear of failure, that opportunity to fail, and looking at it as a strength.
Hmm.
Um, but then also giving that empathy to other people. I think, what do they say? That seek first to understand before being understood.
Yeah.
And I think that's true both for talking to your kids and working with the people in your organization.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think those are the three things: empathy, patience, and flexibility, for sure.
Yeah. I love those. I feel like patience, I'm definitely being tested on a daily basis with my toddlers. My son wanted to put on his pants by himself yesterday, and he did, but they were backwards, and it was
Yeah.
hilarious because it's just like, the zipper and the little string on his butt. He
Yeah.
didn't even notice. Um, but also the empathy of, recognizing that toddlers are going through big emotion changes and it's hard. And there was a point in my life where I was not good at emotional
Yeah.
uh, regulation, going through things. And so it's important skills to teach our kids. And so, as especially raising daughters, right? I would love to know what you're trying to teach them, because
Hmm.
they're older than my kids are, so it's going to be a little different than toddlerhood. So I want to know what you're teaching them.
Hmm. My friend said to me, she's a little bit ahead of me in the same way that I'm a little bit ahead of you, and so I've always looked to her, as kind of my mom tribe. Um, and like, what can I expect at this age? Like, what's coming down the
Yeah.
pipeline? And first of all, I've never had a sister. I have a
Hmm.
brother, and that dynamic
Same.
between brother sister is very different than two girls. And so
Yep.
it's like the blind leading the blind a little bit in that way, that like I actually have no idea with it. My husband has four sisters.
Oh wow.
I have none, and so I don't actually know what this is like. So I'm certainly being confronted with challenges I haven't faced personally or experienced.
Hmm.
But I think modeling or even instilling in them is this idea of compromise is a big word that we use in our
Hmm.
house. So like there's your way and our way. And so we are often talking about that because I think that that translates in the home, but it also
Hmm.
translates out of the home and in every aspect of your life for every
Yeah.
chapter, right? Is that learning how to compromise, hearing other people.
Hmm.
Um, I think of my kids as partners in that when I'm making big life decisions for the family or for them, that I'm always asking for their opinion to some degree so that they feel heard.
Yeah.
That's really important to me. I could easily make decisions, and most of the time we end up with the decision that we ultimately were going to do, and anyway, but it's really important that they feel that they're heard and valued when we're making these decisions because we're a unit, right?
Yeah.
And so I want them to also do that with their friends. Like I want them to hear out their friends, and when they're even to the smallest degree of like picking out a game to play, like have you listened to your friends' feelings about if that's the game they want to play or what piece they want to choose. And so right now in their little lives it translates in such little ways, but my goal is for them for it to amount in bigger ways as they tackle
Hmm.
different phases.
Yeah. And then, you're showing them also what ambition looks like, what working motherhood looks like, what it looks like to pursue your dreams and passions and be a present mother. And, that goes against a lot of what society's pushing, especially right now on social media, as we see a lot more like trad wives and stay-at-home moms and things like that. So I'd love to know if you're teaching your daughters anything about that, anything about ambition, anything about following their dreams, pushing back against what society is maybe trying to condition or tell us, keep, strong women strong and powerful.
Yeah, 100%. So I told you there was no like moment I woke up and was like, I'm gonna start being ambitious. It's just like an identity I've kind of always worn. I'm a high
Uh-huh.
achieving person. At times it can be both a strength but also a saboteur, and that like the bar's always moving, so I need
Hmm.
to remind myself to pause and celebrate, which I'm not good at, but I'm working on. Um, but what I've done for them is they have seen me tackle set goals,
Mm.
achieve goals, and then set a new goal. And
Yeah.
so even when I was doing my dissertation, which I feel like I have like a little PTSD from because it creeped into every aspect of my life in good ways.
Yeah.
But I was up at 4 a.m. every morning and I wrote every day from 4 to 6 because the
Hmm.
moment I heard their little feet on the floor, they would come in and I knew that was the moment I shut my laptop. And
Hmm.
so I restructured my day in a way that didn't bleed into their life, didn't take away from them, but that in those moments, I will always remember that visceral feeling of like hearing them walk down the hallway and I knew that I needed to finish that sentence and turn and embrace them in like as
Oh.
the sun was coming up. And I think and hope that they remember those moments also because
Hmm.
they were seeing me accomplish things. They were seeing me prioritize myself, but without taking away time from them. And that having that balance was really important to me. How I reinforce it with them is they're in gymnastics right now. They go to competitions
Mm.
and I try to have them like narrow their focus when they walk in because beam, bars, vault, floor, like first place,
Yeah.
You can always feel like a failure when you leave there because there's always going to be somebody that's better than you at something. And so when we walk into those spaces, we always preset goals. And I always have them
Mm.
set 1 to 2 goals. I want to get a higher score on vault than I got last time. I want to point my toes when I'm on the beam. I want to get my dismount. So if I can have them focus on those very small incremental goals, they don't get overwhelmed about the process. And so their
Yeah.
opportunity for success is greater, which then reinforces the process of them setting goals. And so they're seeing me model it in big ways because I've lived now 4 decades, and so it's just naturally, right? But for them to see it in their tiny spaces,
Yeah.
I think they're one and the same, but I'm just always trying to find opportunities for them to do that and to feel the fruits of their labor without looking at the forest and not the trees.
That's absolutely fucking amazing. I've never heard that before. And I'm literally gonna do that with my kids, probably starting sooner than later. Once they can understand what goals are a little
Yeah,
bit
and they
more.
don't, I mean, do they even really need to know the term? It's like, today
Yeah.
I want to color a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, it's having a vision and holding yourself accountable to doing it
Yeah.
and then just building in that terminology for them.
Yep. I love that so much. Absolutely so much. Okay, I want to wrap this up with one
Mhm.
final question of what is your favorite part of being an ambitious working mother?
The journey,
Hmm.
the journey. I think all of it helps me to learn more about myself, and that's really cool. What motherhood does is it kind of shifts your identity a little bit and forces you to
Hmm.
pick up a mirror.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we all, as a society, as moms, pick up a microscope of like dissecting what's wrong.
Yeah.
Um, but I really like looking at the mirror and figuring myself out and finding what happiness is for me, for the people
Hmm.
around me, for my tribe. Um, so yeah, I think that's the part of it. We label it as being ambitious, but like I'm just flowing.
I love it. I love this so much. Thank you so much. Where can we find more about you and your coaching?
Absolutely. So we are on TikTok and Instagram at Wellspring Coaches. And also at our website, www.wellspringcoachingandconsulting.org. And you can find bios. This is co-founded. I have a colleague of mine who has been on a similar journey, started in education, but she's a champion for equity and opportunity. So we are pushing each other as moms, as ambitious females, and just learning as we go.
I love that. And we will link to your websites and everything in the description below. And if you are listening to this, that means our June issue has been released, and you can read more of Alex's exclusive written interview in the magazine at motheredmagazine.com. And we'll put that in the comments or description as well. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us on Between Meetings and Motherhood. It's been an absolute blast talking with you.
Thank you. It's been awesome. I want to do it again.
Yes, we will. Thank you so much.